The sheriff's deputy didn't even look me in the eye when he handed me the envelope. I stood in the doorway wearing Mom's oversized cardigan, the one that still smelled faintly of her lavender perfume. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Eviction notice. 30 days to vacate the premises. Behind the deputy, my father stood on the porch with his arms crossed. The wind chimes Mom had hung 20 years ago jingled softly above his head. He looked at me without emotion, like I was a stranger who'd overstayed her welcome. "You can't stay here anymore, May," he said flatly. "It's time to grow up." 3 weeks. It had been 3 weeks since we'd buried my mother. My throat closed up. "Dad, this is my home." "It's my house," he replied, his voice cold and final. "And you're no longer welcome in it." The deputy shifted uncomfortably, mumbled something about procedure, and hurried back to his car. My father turned and walked back inside like he'd just taken out the trash. The door closed with a soft click that somehow sounded like a gunshot. "My name is May Whitaker. I'm 32 years old." And that was the moment I realized my father had been planning to erase me from his life. At Mom's funeral, he'd held my hand during the eulogy. His palm was sweaty and cold, but he'd gripped my fingers tightly. "We'll get through this together," he'd whispered while the pastor spoke about eternal rest and God's mercy. I'd believed him. I had moved back home 2 years earlier when Mom was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. The doctors gave her 18 months. She'd lasted 23, fighting every single day. I'd taken a leave from my marketing job, paid half the household bills, cooked every meal. I'd bathed her when she couldn't stand. I'd held her hand through the worst nights. Dad worked. That's what he said when I asked why he wasn't home more. "Someone has to keep the insurance active, May. Someone has to be practical." Now he was acting like I was a squatter who'd taken advantage of his hospitality. That night, I went to the garage to get boxes for packing. My key didn't work. I tried it 3 times, jiggling the lock, thinking it was stuck. Then I understood. He'd changed the locks. While I'd been at the grocery store that afternoon, he called a locksmith and cut me off from half the house. 3 days after the eviction notice, I walked into the bathroom and stopped cold. There was a pink toothbrush in the holder next to the sink. Definitely wasn't mine. I used electric blue. Mom had used green. Pink meant someone new. I heard laughter from downstairs. A woman's voice, light and musical, nothing like Mom's warm alto. I crept to the top of the stairs and looked down into the living room. Dad sat on the couch with a woman I recognized from the funeral. Brielle. The friend from church who'd hugged him a little too long at the wake, her hand lingering on his shoulder. She had honey blonde hair and wore yoga pants like she'd just come from an exercise class. She was already moving in. I understood everything suddenly. The eviction wasn't about independence or tough love. It was about making space. Making space for a replacement, as if Mom could be swapped out like old furniture. Brielle looked up and saw me on the stairs. She smiled brightly. "Oh, May. Your dad was just telling me about you." "I bet he was." I turned and went back to my room, my stomach churning with rage and grief. 2 nights later, Dad insisted we have dinner together. "Like a family," he said, as if that word meant anything anymore. Brielle sat in Mom's chair. She'd made lasagna using Mom's recipe, though she'd gotten it wrong somehow. Too much oregano, not enough basil. I pushed the food around my plate. "May," Brielle said warmly, "you're young. You have your whole life ahead of you. You'll figure things out." I looked at Dad. He nodded, cutting his lasagna with careful precision. "The house is going on the market next month. Brielle and I talked about it. It's too big for just us." "The house," I repeated slowly. "Mom just died." "It's my property," Dad snapped, his fork clattering against his plate. "I make the decisions about my property." Something about the way he emphasized my property felt rehearsed. Like he'd practiced this conversation in front of a mirror. Brielle reached over and squeezed his hand supportively. I excused myself before I said something I'd regret. In my room, I stared at the ceiling and tried to process what was happening. My father was selling our home. The home where Mom had planted roses every spring. Where she'd taught me to bake bread. Where she died holding my hand. I couldn't sleep that night. At 2 in the morning, I went to Mom's bedroom. Dad had moved into the guest room weeks before she died, claiming he needed better sleep for work. Mom's room still looked exactly as she'd left it. Her reading glasses on the nightstand. Her slippers by the bed. I opened her old metal filing cabinet, the one she'd kept in the closet for as long as I could remember. Mom kept everything. Warranty manuals from 1998. Tax returns from 2005. Birthday cards I'd made in elementary school. I pulled out folders at random, not sure what I was looking for. Birth certificates. Marriage license. Insurance policies. Then at the bottom of the lowest drawer I found a manila envelope. The label read, "Property deed updated." My hand started shaking as I pulled it out. The envelope was sealed with tape, like Mom had wanted to preserve it. I carefully peeled it open and pulled out the documents inside. The first page was a property deed. I scanned the names, expecting to see Dad's name in bold letters, confirming his ownership. But that's not what I found. The deed listed two names, Eleanor Whitaker and May Whitaker, joint tenants with right of survivorship. My name. My mother's name. Dad's name appeared nowhere on this updated version. I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating from grief and exhaustion. But it was real. The document had been notarized and filed with the county recorder's office 8 months before Mom died. She'd updated the deed while Dad was at work one afternoon. I remembered her asking me to drive her to town that day. She'd said she had business to handle. This was the business. Tears blurred my vision as I held the paper. Mom had known. Somehow she'd known that Dad would do this. She'd protected me the only way she could. I carefully folded the deed and put it back in the envelope. Then I took it to my room and hid it under my mattress. For the first time since receiving the eviction notice, I felt something other than despair. I felt power. And I felt rage. Mom had trusted me enough to put my name on her home. Dad trusted me so little that he tried to throw me out like garbage. Tomorrow I would do something about it. The next morning I searched online for estate attorneys. I found one with good reviews, Sharon Bradley. Her website said she specialized in property disputes and family law. I called her office at 9 a.m. sharp. "I need a consultation," I told her assistant. "It's urgent." She fit me in that afternoon. Sharon's office was small but professional, with law books lining the walls and framed degrees behind her desk. She was in her 50s with kind eyes and a firm handshake. I showed her the eviction notice first. She frowned as she read it. Then I showed her the deed. She read it once. Then again more slowly. Finally, she looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "May," she said carefully, "according to this document, you are the legal co-owner of the property. Your father cannot evict you from a home you legally own." The words settled over me like a warm blanket. So the eviction notice is invalid? Completely. In fact, he could face legal consequences for filing a fraudulent eviction. She leaned back in her chair. "This is a clear case. Your mother made sure you were protected. The survivorship clause means her half automatically transferred to you upon her death. You now own at least 50%, possibly more depending on how the original purchase was structured." I felt tears coming and blinked them back. "What do I do?" "We fight back," Sharon said simply. I waited until that evening when Dad and Brielle were both home. I'd spent the afternoon making copies of the deed, per Sharon's advice. The original was locked in Sharon's office safe. The copy in my hand felt like a weapon. I walked into the kitchen and placed it on the counter between us. Dad was pouring wine for Brielle. He glanced down at the paper, then froze. The color drained from his face. "What is this?" he asked, but his voice had lost its authority. "The property deed," I said calmly. "The one Mom filed 8 months before she died. The one that makes me co-owner of this house." Brielle snatched up the paper, her eyes scanning rapidly. Her perfectly made-up face twisted into confusion, then anger. "This can't be valid. Eleanor wasn't in her right mind at the end. She was perfectly lucid when she signed this," I replied. "It was notarized, witnessed, filed with the county, 8 months before she got really sick." Dad's hand trembled as he set down the wine bottle. "You manipulated her. You convinced her to do this while I was working to support this family." The accusation hung in the air like poison. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Then the rage came flooding back. "I manipulated her?" My voice rose. I was the one who held her hair when she vomited from chemo. I was the one who sat with her at 3 a.m. when she couldn't sleep because of the pain. Where were you, Dad? Working late? Or were you already spending time with Brielle? Silence crashed down. Brielle's face flushed red. Dad looked away. Dad tried to regain control of the conversation. You turned her against me. My own wife. You made her think I didn't care. I didn't have to make her think anything, I said quietly. Your actions spoke for themselves. This is ridiculous, Brielle interjected. Eleanor was medicated, confused. Any lawyer will contest this. My lawyer already reviewed it, I replied. It's airtight, which means you can't evict me. You can't sell the house without my permission. And if you try, I'll file a lawsuit for harassment and elder abuse for the way you isolated Mom in her final months. The threat was Sharon's idea. We didn't actually have evidence of elder abuse, but the accusation alone would be devastating in court. Dad's jaw clenched. Get out of my sight. It's my house too, I reminded him. I'm not going anywhere. I walked out of the kitchen, my heart pounding. Behind me, I heard Brielle hiss something at Dad. Their perfect plan was falling apart. And I was just getting started. A week later, I was scrolling through my phone when I got an alert from a real estate app. Someone had listed a property at our address. Our house. Posted for sale. With professional photos and a description that didn't mention the property dispute or the fact that the co-owner hadn't consented. My hand shook as I called Sharon. He listed it anyway. Forward me the listing, she said immediately. We'll file an emergency injunction. Within 48 hours, Sharon had contacted the real estate agent, provided copies of the deed, and threatened legal action. The listing disappeared from every website. The agent sent a formal letter dropping Dad and Brielle as clients. No reputable agent will touch this property now, Sharon told me. Not with a documented co-owner dispute. Your father has poisoned his own sale. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I just felt tired. This was my father. The man who'd taught me to ride a bike. Who'd paid for my college education. Now we were fighting in courtrooms and lawyers' offices. But then I remembered Mom's face in those final weeks. How she'd whisper, "Don't let him bully you, sweetheart. You're stronger than you know." She'd been preparing me for this. She'd known exactly who he'd become after she was gone. My Aunt Sylvia called on a Tuesday afternoon. She was Dad's younger sister and had always been kind to me growing up. "May, honey," she said carefully. "Your father called me. He says you're trying to steal his house. That you forged documents while your mother was dying." My stomach dropped. He was spinning the narrative, turning family against me. "Aunt Sylvia, that's not true. Mom put my name on the deed 8 months before she died. I have the notarized documents. I can send them to you." There was a long pause. "Send them, please." I forwarded everything. The deed. The notary stamp. The county filing receipts. Within an hour, Aunt Sylvia called back. "I believe you," she said quietly. "And I'm sorry I doubted you. Your father has always been good at making himself the victim. Did he do this before?" "Oh, honey. Your mother protected you from a lot over the years." Aunt Sylvia sighed. "He's not a bad man. But he's selfish. Your mother knew that. She planned for it." After we hung up, I sat with those words. Mom had spent years protecting me from Dad's selfishness. Now she was still protecting me from beyond the grave. The narrative was starting to shift. Family members who'd initially taken Dad's side were seeing the truth. And with each person who saw through his lies, his power weakened. Sharon called me 3 weeks into the legal battle. "May, we have a problem. A big one." My chest tightened. "What kind of problem?" "During discovery, we accessed your parents' financial records. Your father took out a home equity loan 18 months ago. Without your mother's signature or knowledge. How is that possible?" "He forged her signature on the loan documents. We're comparing it to known signatures now, but I'm 90% certain. The loan was for $80,000. I felt sick. Where did the money go? We're tracing it now. But here's the thing. He's in default. He hasn't made a payment in 4 months. The bank is threatening foreclosure." Suddenly everything made sense. The rushed sale. The eviction. The new woman. Dad wasn't grieving. He was drowning in debt and trying to use the house as a life raft. He's selling the house to cover the loan, I said slowly, and probably to start fresh somewhere else with Brielle. But here's the good news. Since the loan was taken fraudulently, the bank's claim to the property is questionable. We can fight it. But you need to know what we're dealing with. This wasn't just about the house anymore. This was about Dad's financial desperation and how far he'd go to save himself. 2 days later, Sharon called me into her office. Her face was grim. May, your father's attorney just submitted a revised deed to the court. One that removes your name. My blood ran cold. What? How? They're claiming the deed you have is invalid and this is the real one, filed around the same time. She slid the document across her desk. I stared at it. The paper looked similar to mine, same county header, same format. But my name was gone. Only Dad's name appeared as owner. Then I noticed the notary stamp. The date on it was from 2 years ago, but the stamp design itself looked wrong. Too clean. Too new. This is fake, I said. I think so too. The notary stamp expired a year before this was supposedly signed. And look at your mother's signature. Sharon pointed. I looked closely. Mom's signature was shaky, uncertain. Nothing like her usual confident script. This isn't how she signed things. Exactly. Your father attempted to forge a counterdeed. Which is a crime. Sharon's expression hardened. We're going to bury him with this. The realization washed over me. Dad hadn't just tried to evict me. He'd tried to erase me from legal documents. He'd committed fraud to do it. My mother had protected me. And my father had betrayed both of us. The court date arrived on a gray morning in October. I wore the navy dress Mom had bought me for job interviews. Sharon sat beside me, organized and calm. Across the courtroom, Dad sat with his attorney, a nervous-looking man who kept adjusting his tie. Brielle sat in the gallery behind them, her face carefully blank. Judge Anderson reviewed both deeds in silence. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Finally, she looked up. Mr. Whitaker, can you explain why your submitted deed has a notary stamp that expired before the document was allegedly signed? Dad's attorney stood quickly. Your Honor, that must be an administrative error by the county office. An administrative error? The judge's eyebrows rose. And can you explain why Mrs. Whitaker's signature on your version looks substantially different from her signature on medical consent forms from the same time period? Dad's hands gripped the table. I saw his knuckles go white. Your Honor, Sharon stood. We believe Mr. Whitaker forged this document in an attempt to disinherit his daughter and claim sole ownership to cover fraudulent debts. The judge looked at Dad with cold assessment. Sir, this appears fraudulent. I'm entering the attempted forgery into the court record. The original deed filed by Mrs. Eleanor Whitaker is hereby recognized as valid and binding. Brielle's face went pale. Dad stared straight ahead, his jaw working. The fraud was now part of his permanent legal record. Any future disputes would have this hanging over him. Justice tasted bitter and sweet all at once. After the hearing, Sharon pulled me aside in the hallway. There's something else you should know. We did some digging into your father's recent activities. What did you find? He remarried. 2 weeks after your mother's funeral. A quick courthouse ceremony with Brielle. The words hit me like a physical blow. 2 weeks. Mom had barely been in the ground. Why would he do that so fast? Spousal protection laws. If he's married, certain assets become harder for creditors to seize. It was a financial move, not a romantic one. Sharon's expression was sympathetic. Brielle wasn't grieving at the funeral. She was calculating. I thought about the woman in yoga pants sitting in Mom's chair using Mom's recipes. She hadn't been a comfort to a grieving widower. She'd been a partner in a scheme. They deserve each other, I said quietly. Sharon nodded. The good news is that his rush to remarry shows desperation. Desperate people make mistakes. And he's made several. I walked out of the courthouse into pale autumn sunlight. Somewhere in the city, Dad and Brielle were probably fighting about how badly the hearing had gone. How their plan had fallen apart. I drove home. To my home. The one Mom had made sure I'd keep. Sharon subpoenaed all of Dad's financial records. What we found was worse than I'd imagined. 3 months before Mom died, Dad had transferred $12,000 from her personal bank account into his own. The memo line said medical expenses, but we cross-referenced it with hospital bills. The money hadn't gone to medical care. It had gone to pay off credit card debt Dad had accumulated over 2 years. Expensive dinners, hotel stays, purchases from jewelry stores. He was spending on Brielle while your mother was dying, Sharon said flatly. And he used your mother's money to do it. I sat in her office staring at the bank statements, the dates of the hotel stays. Mom had been in the hospital during some of those nights. Dad had told me he was staying late at work to finish projects. He'd been with Brielle, building his exit plan while Mom fought for every breath. Can we use this in court? I asked. Absolutely. Financial abuse of an elderly or terminally ill person is taken very seriously. This strengthens your case significantly. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I kept thinking about Mom asking me where Dad was during her hospital stays. I'd made excuses for him. He's working hard to keep the insurance active, Mom. He's stressed. She just nodded sadly, like she knew better but didn't want to burden me with the truth. I finally broke down in Sharon's office the following week. We were reviewing testimony when suddenly I couldn't hold it together anymore. The tears came hard and fast. She begged for him, I sobbed. In the hospital. She kept asking when he'd visit. And he was with that woman. He let her die thinking he cared. Sharon handed me tissues and waited patiently. Your mother knew more than you think. The deed proves that. She knew exactly who he was. Then why did she stay? Because leaving would have been harder on you. She chose your stability over her happiness. That's what mothers do. Sharon's voice was gentle. And she made sure he couldn't hurt you after she was gone. That was her final gift. I wiped my eyes. I wish I could tell her thank you. You are telling her. By fighting for what she left you. By not letting him rewrite history. Sharon leaned forward. Your mother was a warrior, May. She taught you how to be one too. I left the office feeling raw but stronger. Mom had fought her battles quietly, behind the scenes, protecting me from damage I didn't even know existed. Now it was my turn to fight. Loudly. In courtrooms and legal documents. This was how I honored her memory. Dad's attorney called Sharon with a settlement offer. My client is willing to buy out your client's interest in the property for $40,000. The house was worth $300,000. He was offering me barely 13%. Counter offer, Sharon said coolly. Your client can buy out his interest for $150,000. Or we go to trial and expose all the financial fraud. That's unreasonable. What's unreasonable is your client forging deeds, stealing from his dying wife, and attempting to illegally evict his daughter. Take the offer to him. They declined. We prepared for trial. But I could tell Dad was getting nervous. The evidence was stacking up against him. The forged deed, the fraudulent loan, the transferred funds. Every piece of paper told the same story. A man who'd betrayed his family for money. Sharon was confident. He's going to fold. Men like your father are bullies. They only fight when they think they'll win. He's realizing he won't. I wanted to believe her. But part of me worried Dad would burn everything down rather than admit defeat. Some people would rather destroy what they can't control than let someone else have it. I just hoped he wasn't one of them. I was reading in the living room when I heard them fighting upstairs. Dad and Brielle's voices carried through the old house's thin walls. You said her name wasn't on it. Brielle's voice was sharp with anger. You promised me this would be simple. I thought it would be. Eleanor never told me she'd changed the deed. So now what? We're stuck in this house with your daughter staring at us every day? This isn't what I signed up for. We'll figure it out. No, you'll figure it out. I'm not spending my life in a legal battle. Her footsteps pounded down the stairs. She grabbed her purse from the hall table and looked at me. Good luck with him. You'll need it. The door slammed. Dad appeared at the top of the stairs, looking 10 years older than he had that morning. He stared at me with something like hatred. Are you happy now? He asked. I'm just protecting what Mom left me. Your mother turned you against me. Poisoned you. No, I said quietly. You did that all by yourself. He went back to his room. I heard the door lock. The illusion of control that had sustained him and Brielle was crumbling. Without her pushing the sale, without her reinforcing his narrative, he was just a man facing the consequences of his choices. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Judge Anderson called us back to court for a final ruling. The courtroom was nearly empty this time. Just me, Sharon, Dad, and his attorney. The judge had reviewed all the evidence. Bank records. The forged deed. Testimony from the notary who'd witnessed Mom's original signature. Medical records proving Mom's competency. I've reached a decision, Judge Anderson said. The property deed filed by Eleanor Whitaker 8 months before her death is valid and legally binding. May Whitaker is the rightful co-owner with survivorship rights. Dad's shoulders sagged. Furthermore, the attempted submission of forged documents is a serious offense. Mr. Whitaker, you're fortunate Ms. Whitaker isn't pressing criminal charges. The eviction notice filed against your daughter is void and unenforceable. The judge looked at me. Ms. Whitaker, this property is your home. Your father has no legal right to remove you. Thank you, Your Honor. As for the fraudulent home equity loan, the bank has been notified. Mr. Whitaker, you'll need to address that debt without using this property as collateral, as you never had legal authority to take the loan. Dad's attorney whispered something to him. Dad nodded stiffly. The gavel came down. Case closed. We filed out into the hallway. Dad walked past me without a word. His entire scheme had collapsed. The fraud was on record. His credibility was destroyed. And he still owed $80,000 to the bank. 2 weeks later, Dad's attorney called Sharon with a new offer. Mr. Whitaker would like to sell his remaining interest in the property to his daughter. He's willing to accept $75,000. Sharon looked at me. It's below market value for his share, but it would give you full ownership. No more disputes. I thought about it. $75,000 was most of my savings, but it would end this. No more fighting. No more court dates. No more seeing Dad's car in the driveway. I'll take it, I said. We drew up the papers. Dad signed without looking at me. The notary witnessed the transfer. Just like that, the house became entirely mine. Eleanor and May Whitaker's home, now just May's. Dad had 1 week to move out. I watched from the window as he packed boxes into his truck. Brielle didn't come back to help. He loaded everything alone, making trip after trip. The garage that he'd locked me out of. The bedroom he'd claimed. The living room where he'd announced his engagement to Brielle in Mom's favorite chair. All of it gone. He didn't say goodbye. He just drove away, the truck disappearing around the corner. I stood in the doorway, feeling the weight of the empty house settling around me. It was mine. Finally, completely mine. The first thing I did was change the locks. All of them. Front door, back door, garage windows. I hired a locksmith and watched as every old key became useless. Then I painted. Mom's favorite color had been sage green, but Dad hated it. I painted the kitchen sage green. The living room too. I tore down the heavy brown curtains Dad had insisted on and replaced them with light, airy white ones. Sunlight poured through the windows for the first time in years. I planted roses in the garden where Mom's old ones had died. Red ones, yellow ones, pink ones. I could almost hear her voice telling me to add more mulch, to water them in the evening when the sun wasn't so harsh. The house started feeling like peace instead of a battlefield. Every room I reclaimed felt like taking back a piece of myself. This wasn't just Mom's house anymore. It was our house. Mine and hers together. Aunt Sylvia visited and cried when she saw the changes. Your mother would love this, she said, touching the sage green walls. I hope so. She's proud of you, May. Wherever she is, she's so proud. I believed her. I felt Mom's presence in the house more than ever. In the roses. In the sunlight. In the quiet peace of knowing I was exactly where I belonged. 6 months after the final sale, I converted the downstairs den into something special. A small meeting space with comfortable chairs, soft lighting, and bookshelves filled with resources about grief and loss. I called it Eleanor's Place. A grief support group for daughters caring for terminally ill parents. A safe space for women carrying too much weight alone. We met every Thursday evening. Women of all ages came. Some were in the thick of caregiving. Others were navigating life after loss. We shared stories, cried together, supported each other. My father doesn't understand why I'm spending so much time with my mom, one woman said during our third meeting. He says I'm neglecting my own life. You're honoring your mother, I told her. That's never a waste. Creating Eleanor's place felt like the truest way to honor Mom. She'd spent her life quietly supporting others, me, her book club friends, neighbors who needed help. Now her home was doing the same. I printed Mom's photo and hung it by the door. Her gentle smile welcomed everyone who entered. People often commented on how peaceful she looked. She was, I always said. Even at the end she was peaceful. Because she knew I'd be okay. And I was. Finally truly okay. A year after Mom's death, I was working in the garden when a car slowed down in front of the house. I looked up and saw Dad behind the wheel. He didn't stop. Didn't wave. Just stared at the house as he drove slowly past. I saw him take in the new paint, the roses, the sign by the door that read Eleanor's Place Grief Support Group, Thursdays 6 p.m. His face was unreadable. Then he accelerated and disappeared down the street. I went back to my roses. He could drive by 100 times. It wouldn't change anything. This house wasn't his anymore. It never really had been. Inside, I could hear voices from the grief group gathering early. Women supporting women. Daughters honoring mothers. Lives being rebuilt from loss. The porch light glowed warm against the evening sky. Mom's wind chimes sang in the breeze. Everything was exactly as it should be. Dad had tried to erase me from this place, from Mom's legacy, from the life we'd built together. But Mom had written me into permanence. She'd put my name on the deed and trusted me to protect what she'd created. And I had. The property deed told a story Dad couldn't rewrite. A story of a mother's love and a daughter's strength. A story that ended not with eviction, but with roots growing deeper. I still sleep in my old bedroom. I thought about moving into Mom's room, but it didn't feel right. Instead, I turned it into a reading library for the grief group. Comfortable chairs, good lighting, shelves full of books about healing and hope. Sometimes late at night I walk through the house and feel overwhelming gratitude. Not for the property itself, though I'm grateful for that, but for what it represents. Mom knew. Even while fighting cancer, even while dealing with Dad's betrayal, she'd thought ahead. She protected me in the most practical way possible, by making sure I'd have a home, security, a foundation. The deed wasn't just a legal document. It was a love letter. It said, I see you. I trust you. You deserve this. Dad had tried to take it all away. The house, the security, even the memory of Mom's love. He'd filed that eviction notice thinking I was powerless, thinking he controlled the narrative. But he'd forgotten that Mom was always the strongest person in our family. Quiet strength, the kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind that plans and protects and perseveres. She'd taught me that strength. And when I'd found that deed in her filing cabinet, she'd handed me the tools to fight back. Now I stand in the kitchen she loved, painted her favorite color, filled with her recipes and her spirit. Eleanor's place is thriving. Women are healing. And I'm exactly where I belong. Dad tried to erase me, but Mom wrote me into permanence. And the property deed told the truth he could never change. This house, this home, this legacy, it belongs to the women who loved it, not the man who tried to steal it. I look at Mom's photo by the door. Her gentle smile. Her wise eyes. Thank you, I whisper. For everything. The wind chimes sing in response. And I know she heard me.